Okay, everyone, find your seats here. Ready to go? All right, welcome to New York Tech Week. It is awesome to see such a great crowd here for this kickoff event. Thank you. I'd love to welcome everyone on behalf of the AWS and Lux teams. Thank you for joining us here. I think we have an amazing event set up for you today. My name is Jason Guzman. I lead our venture capital and startups team, and I'll be your MC today. In my job, I get to work with the best investors in the world and the amazing founders that they back, and so it's a really fun job. A lot of my folks from my team are here today, so take some time to meet them. I'd love to chat with all of you as well. We have an amazing set of content lined up for you today. Panelists that I think are going to be really great at shedding some light on what's happening with GenAI. I'm old enough to have lived through at least 4 major platform shifts. So personal computing, the internet, mobile, cloud. And I think we can all say that we're at the beginning of a 5th with GenAI. And what you can learn from all those previous shifts is that it's events like this with folks like yourselves who help us figure out what this is going to become. And there just isn't a more exciting time to be in technology than at the dawn of one of these big shifts. So I'm super, super excited for where we are today and what we're doing, and for all the speakers and content that we're going to hear today. We are going to, after the session today, we're going to wrap up with a cocktail reception. So you can access that. It's 1 floor down from us. In the back, there's a staircase there that you may have seen. Just go down that staircase, and that's where we'll have the reception. To kick things off, I'd like to introduce Brennan Demrow. Brennan leads our GenAI for AWS startups, and Brennan's going to share with us some of the really exciting things that AWS is doing in GenAI. Brennan, come on up.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be here. As Jason said, super excited to be at New York Tech Week this week. I mean, this is just incredible. We flew out together on the plane last night, and we were just talking about these transformations and the things happening right now in the AI space. The energy is incredible. It's a once-in-a-lifetime moment. So, savor it, enjoy it, and appreciate being here with all of you tonight. So as Jason said, I'm Brennan Demrow, and I lead the GenAI startup sales team at AWS. So my scope is that, and I basically get to work with, as Jason said, he works with all the top VCs and partners. My team manages the relationships with the best, brightest, and forthcoming GenAI startups all across North America. So every day we get to be in the field, spending time with these amazing folks as they build their technologies and their platforms. And our goal is to help them unblock their technology and grow to be the next greatest GenAI startup. I wanted to take a moment to reflect on this big initiative we did this year. So AWS launched the AWS GenAI Accelerator this past summer. This was an amazing opportunity to showcase 21 of the top GenAI startups in the world. We actually have one of the startups in the audience here, Crikey.ai, if you want to give a shout out. Kadeki and John V, if you want to say hello. So we looked at 2,100 applications for this incredibly bespoke program. And so this was an opportunity for AWS to really lean into the space for our startups. So we provided up to $300,000 of credits, business consultation, and technical consultation. So this was really our opportunity to pay back and to create a flywheel in this space. Tremendous success overall. We're going to be launching phase 2 of this in 2024. So if you're a startup in the audience or a VC who's investing in future startups, please submit your application next year for this great opportunity. So talking a little bit about our stack. So, a lot of people know AWS and the infrastructure and EC2. There's 3 layers of our stack. And from an AI ML perspective, our infrastructure, our SageMaker application, and our top layer, which is our AI stack. And so we have over 100,000 startups across the globe that are leveraging our services on a daily basis. And over the last 6 to 9 months, as we've gone through this ChatGPT evolution, the constant thing we heard from GenAI startups and startups in general was, hey, we would love to access these really incredible models like Anthropic and Cohere and Stability, but it's really expensive. And so we took the liberty to launch our new product, which is AWS Bedrock, 2 weeks ago. And AWS Bedrock is a managed platform for startups, enterprises, customers of all sizes to have access to the world's best models within their VPC. One of the things you're going to hear consistently AWS talk about is job zero for us is security. And so we think about Bedrock and also SageMaker Jumpstart as the ability for you to access these models, but to do it within your VPC. So what does that mean? As you're fine-tuning these data sets and incorporating them into your own GenAI applications, that data does not leave your VPC. And we think this is really, really important and one of the foundational pieces of how we're thinking about GenAI in general. So we're really excited about Bedrock. If you have not seen that, please take a look. We're going to be making some pretty significant announcement at reInvent as well in terms of advancements in these technologies. But we're really excited about the accessibility and the consumption so far to date from our startup community. So all that to be said, look, we think about the startup community as the backbone and the lifeline of future enterprises. So if you look back in history at AWS, in 2000, early 2000s, right? So Andy and the team was building our Amazon.com business, which birthed this AWS business. And so one of the things we looked at was really investing in our startup community. And these startups went on to become Slacks, Plaid, Salesforce, et cetera. So we very much look at the startup space as an ecosystem that we need to continue to invest in, not just capital, but also thought leadership and resources. And so as you look towards the decisions you're making about infrastructure partners and ecosystem partners in terms of the cloud, Amazon is a partner that has historically always been there for startups, and we will continue to double down in this space. I wanted to bring up AWS Activate. So there's actually a QR code over here to the right. So AWS Activate is one of our absolute critical programs for startups. This is a program that allows our startups to take advantage of credits and also additional savings from our third-party partners, such as Brex, Carta, MongoDB, Notion, Miro, and a host of others. So there's a code right over here. We'll continue to leverage this program as an investment mechanism for our startups to ensure that they can build and get off the ground running in a sustainable way. So. Last but not least, this is our Creme de la Creme event coming up at the end of November, early December. Would love to see as many folks in here as possible at AWS reInvent. So this is November 27th through December 1st. This is our penultimate event every year where we make our broad announcements on all of our services. We'll have several keynotes, including Adam Silipsky, Swami, Bratton, a number of our AI ML leaders will be presenting. Hopefully some of the folks in this room actually on keynote stage and making some significant announcements about AWS's future and technology, as well as startups. But in closing, I wanted to say thank you all. Super excited to meet you folks tonight, to mingle a little bit. It's great to be back out in New York, and have a wonderful rest of Tech Week.
Nick, Jeff.
Thank you, Jason. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Well, thank you all. I'd like to welcome you to our AWS offices here in Midtown. As Jason mentioned, my name's Nick Hartman. I'm an area leader of solutions architecture on our startups team, which means that my team works with startups all across the US, building all sorts of exciting things for their customers, including a growing number of GenAI startups. And I'm really honored to be joined here today by Jeff, Chief Product Officer of Hugging Face. We're going to be talking through some things about GenAI, which is all the rage, I hear. But maybe you could just start off by telling us a little bit about Hugging Face. I mean, some folks in the room might be familiar with the model repository. You've kind of become the de facto place for folks to publish their models, but Hugging Face is a lot more than that. So you could tell us a bit, what is Hugging Face's overall vision?
Yeah, happy to. And actually, who's familiar with Hugging Face here? Okay, everybody. So you know that the name actually stands for that cute little emoji, with the two hands, yeah? So what I love to do is before we start the talk, can you all do the Hugging Face emoji for me, and I'll take a selfie? Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's for the 1,000 people who couldn't make it into the room. Sorry about that. So to the broader mission of Hugging Face, our mission is to democratize good machine learning. And we do this through open science, through open source, and through our products and services. Through open science, we make the latest models available to the community. Shout out to Victor San here. His latest drop with the team is IDFix, state-of-the-art multimodal text plus image equals text. model that you should definitely play with if you have any use case with multimodal. We democratize good machine learning with our open source. I get a sense that you guys all know about the Transformers library, but there's a whole ecosystem of libraries. Actually, Hugging Face is the 25th biggest contributor of open source, if you rank that by GitHub stars in the world. And we democratize good machine learning through our products and services. And the first product is our open platform, the Hugging Face Hub, where we host over 1 million open repositories today. That means 1 million models, 1 million, well, altogether models, data sets, and machine learning applications. The Hugging Face Hub is where researchers go to publish their work, to collaborate together. It's where data scientists go to find, explore, access, experiment with all those great models made available by the community. And the Hugging Face Hub is where developers today turn all these models into applications and features. And then I mentioned our services. So another way that we help democratize good machine learning is by working hand in hand with companies, with enterprises, to accelerate their adoption of open source AI so that they can build their own apps, their own features confidently with open source. Does that answer?
Excellent.
Cool.
And you spoke about AI democratization. And so what are some of the benefits of democratizing AI?
Well, I think one of the main benefits is that through open source AI, so open source AI encompasses a lot of things, right? It's like openly accessible models. It means that it's not just the models, but you know which data went into training the models through open data sets. It means that you have access to all of this through open source libraries. It means that the research itself it's open through papers, so we can learn from each other's experiments. All of this is open source AI. And it's important because it's the way that AI is being created, exists, right? So today there wouldn't be any ChatGPT if there hadn't been decades of open science research before it, if there hadn't been the Transformer, if there hadn't been BERT by Google, and all the great science work from the community. So it's not so much that open source AI, I always have to add the source. I want to say open AI, but I can't. So it's not just that it's important, it's that it's how the AI sausage has been made forever. And today it's important for enterprises as well because it's the only way through which you can really take control of your AI destiny, right? You can be a customer of AI and like use proprietary models through APIs, or you can create your own AI and sort of own the features that you put in front of your customers and build your own IP while you develop your AI skill set.
As you mentioned, there's a growing range of models being deployed every day, fine-tuning, et cetera. What do you see as some of the most common use cases out there, or the growing use cases that have come into play over the last few months?
The last few months, well, I mean, this year has been really the explosion of large language models, right? And generative AI with like text to image, et cetera. And that interest is definitely new, but broadly what we've seen over the past 3 years is the multiplication, the diversification of all the use cases which can be solved using this new kind of machine learning models, which are transformers. 3 years ago when I joined Hugging Face was really all about NLP, natural language processing text, right? So you could classify, translate, summarize, etc. And now, like the same techniques that are used to do all of this are also used to do audio and speech use cases, to transcribe what I'm saying to text and summarize it and identify when I'm speaking, when Nick is speaking. And also computer vision to identify objects and images and all those great tasks. So it's kind of an exciting time to be a machine learning engineer because the same set of tools, of techniques, of algorithms, of libraries are used by everybody in the community, whether you're a specialist in NLP or you're computer vision experts. And so speaking of the latest, the last few months, so of course LLMs, the ability to sort of use these models that have very general capabilities to do a whole bunch of stuff around text. But then it's combining that with an actual source of truth, because a model will never tell you that it doesn't know something, it will just make something up. So it's important to ground it into some ground truth, which may be your own internal knowledge base. And that's what this whole retrieval augmented generation wave is all about right now. And maybe another very exciting development is more and more interest into making models more efficient, meaning having the same level of capabilities with a smaller model, that maybe you don't need 8 A100s, but maybe you need 1 A100. Maybe you need a 7 billion Mistral model and not a 70 billion Llama 2 model, etc. So that's a very cool development.
Yeah. So many of the folks, I'm guessing here in the audience today, are thinking about how they deploy machine learning and generative AI into various business applications. What are some of the challenges that customers might face in terms of figuring out where to deploy these models in production environments with their business processes, et cetera?
I think one challenge that a lot of companies, a lot of startups, a lot of enterprises are sort of starting their AI journey relying on APIs, on proprietary models. And it's very easy to sort of get started this way and get a first prototype, maybe raise some money. But then you get very quickly to a cliff where there's a precipice and you don't know what to do next. There's like the next step is not obvious. And I think that's one big challenge for companies is to go from that initial proof of concept, they got something working, to something that can actually scale, that doesn't cost them too much money per user, that can adapt to their particular use case. And so that's why using open source tools, using open models and open data sets enables companies to be on a journey where they will be able to sort of do bigger and better things over time and upskill their teams in the process. And then, of course, there's access to compute, right? I think probably that resonates with a lot of people in the room. It's kind of hard to get access to more and more GPUs, so that's also a limiting factor.
Yeah. And I guess data flows as well in terms of figuring out what data to train on and do fine-tuning on, do RAG on, et cetera, helps differentiate those models for different use cases.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot of talk about how GenAI will impact different job functions, humanity overall. What are your viewpoints in terms of what is the future of AI in terms of our day-to-day lives?
Yeah. I'm really not too concerned about humanity overall. I mean, I'm very concerned about humanity overall, but not because of AI. But there are like very clear and present use cases. We think that one of our core beliefs is that AI is like the default way of creating technology nowadays. And just like any new powerful tool, it can be used for great things or for nefarious things. What I'm most excited about is how through applications of AI in everything that we use every day, we'll all be able to be more productive. And that, I think, is going to be a net benefit for at scale. So let's say at humanity scale, maybe. Yeah. But that I'm very excited about.
So Hugging Face has announced AWS as their preferred cloud provider. So could you walk us through a little bit more of the relationship between Hugging Face and AWS and what you find attractive about building on AWS?
For sure, yeah, no, it goes way back. Like you're showing here, like AWS Activate, like back in the days. I think Victor, you remember, we're like an early member back when it was just a few people down in Brooklyn. That's where it started, right? And me personally, I joined 3 years ago, and I remember 3 years ago we were discussing with Bratin Saha how we could collaborate to the benefit of our joint customers. And we've gone such a long way since. And I think the reason why we wanted to partner in the first place is still true today. Like 3 years ago, Amazon SageMaker already was like the most complete platform for AI builders to build anything that they want to do, any use case that they want, leveraging open models to build things. And that's certainly still true today. But the progress that we've been able to accomplish since is really great. I can share with you like the actual numbers, but it's been really, really cool to see like how many companies we've been able to enable through all the work that we do together. Like if you're not familiar, together we build deep learning containers. So you have sort of environments that are off the shelf, always current, like Mistral comes out, like you can use Mistral, like Falcon 180B comes out, like you can use it to fine tune it with our training deep learning container, to deploy it with our inference deep learning container. We even have now a large language model inference container. So by and large, everything that you would be able to do with Hugging Face open source, you can do in a managed way within Amazon SageMaker. But that's not the only thing that we do. And actually, we announced early this year that we wanted to double down our collaboration to really focus on efficiency, machine learning efficiency, to make sure that when you deploy machine learning at scale, you can save as much money, as much energy as you can. And that's the whole purpose of our collaboration with the Trainium and Inferentia team. Like they build these AI accelerators that are available on EC2, on SageMaker, so you can apply your machine learning workloads on these much more efficient hardware. So that's a super exciting area of collaboration, and we're very active on that front.
Yeah, and for those who aren't familiar, Trainium and Inferentia are our purpose-built machine learning accelerators, our own purpose-built silicon. As the name might suggest, Trainium is for training ML models, and Inferentia is for performing inference on ML models. And Hugging Face has a broad range of great turnkey options for SageMaker where you can explore and deploy that, as you're mentioning. So what does Hugging Face have in store for the upcoming year? I mean, everything in GenAI is moving so fast. Even thinking where we're going to be in 12 months is almost kind of mind-boggling. But what do you have in mind? What are the things you're focusing on in the coming months and over the next year?
Well, I work a lot with our customers, and one thing that I'm really excited about is all these great demos and prototypes that have been done this year sort of turn into production features. And that's where we can help through our libraries, our products, our services, the stuff that we do with AWS. So that I'm super, super excited about. And then on the science front, I think multimodal is a big theme. So I mentioned IDFix. Like how do you pronounce it, Victor?
Depends who you talk to.
Okay. Okay.
IDFix.
All right, it's IDFix. So check it out on the Hugging Face Hub. IDFix, you can ask it questions with text, add some images in there. Like, is this plug good for like traveling in Europe or not? Like IDFix will answer. And so it's a great proof point that there will always be open alternatives to the best proprietary models right now. So just a few months ago, that's something that you would be able to do with a proprietary model, and today you are able to do that with an open model, which means that you can adapt that to your particular use case and have something that you can run in your own sort of environment, and as I said, like remain in control of your destiny as you build your AI roadmap.
Yeah, and you were just talking there about proprietary versus open models. I mean, what are some of the other benefits of open models and open source within the GenAI space?
Mm-hmm. I think it's an easier question, like if it's asked the other way. Like, I mean, by and large, like closed models is very much an epiphenomenon, right? I mean, AI has always been open. It's always been a science-driven field, and so it's a very recent event that we have these like proprietary closed models where you don't know how big it is, you don't know how it's built, you don't know what training data went into it, you just can't query it. So what are the benefits of open models vis-a-vis closed? I mean, I touched on a bunch of them, right? So you know what training data, or you should know what training data went into them. So for instance, if you're looking at a code use case, code generation, you have as closed models Codex. Well, I don't think it's available, but you can use GitHub Copilot. You can use Code Whisperer, or you can use an open model like StarCoder. StarCoder, which was the result of the Big Code open science collaboration, Hugging Face service now with the community, is actually a very interesting test case because it's one in which the open model outperforms. Like if you look at the benchmarks through which code generation is usually being evaluated, you actually have an open model that outperforms the closed models that came before it. And so that in itself is really exciting, right? So you can expect from open models that there will be a faster rate of progress as the community sort of build upon each other's work. So you have a more future-proof sort of solution. Another thing that's unique is that when you use StarCoder, you actually know what data went into training StarCoder. It's an open data set. It's called a stack. It's accessible on the Hugging Face Hub. You can look at it. You can search it. You can see if your code, if you're on GitHub, is actually part of the training data set and requests to be opted out. So that is a lot of benefit, right? So you want to adapt it. You want to fine-tune it to your own code base. You wonder, well, what is the similarity between my code and that of the training data set? You can do that very easily. Maybe you have a legal department, and your legal department is like, wait, hold on, like I need to know a little bit. If you're going to generate code that's like in our code base that comes from a model, like I want to know actually what went into this thing. That happens. And then another reason is that closed models, typically you can only use them through APIs, meaning that you cannot host them in your own infrastructure, meaning that as you use them, you send out data through the internet. So say, again, the code generation use case, that means every time you have a developer that sort of types in their IDE, well, your source code goes through the internet. I don't know. Maybe that's something that, I don't know, maybe it's fine. Yeah.
So
I got more of that.
Yeah, well, and I think what we're hearing is, it's a lot more than just traditional open source. Here's the code, look at the code, et cetera. It's a lot more than just the code for the model, and the data is very important as well, both on what you're sending to the model, but also what the model was trained on. I mean, one of the things that's been written about a lot recently is in terms of knowing what data the model is trained on. If we start to get to a scenario where models are trained on the output of other models, and then you end up in this sort of weird cycle of models training on model output, which kind of leads you into weird places. So what would you say we should be looking at in terms of having a better understanding of what data was used to train the models and avoid those sort of scenarios potentially developing?
I think transparency of training data is the most important thing. And just to alleviate that specific use case, definitely. I mean, using a larger model to train a smaller model is like a pretty beaten scientific path, right? I mean, model distillation, sort of like along the same theme. So I think, no, the main thing is transparency, knowing what data went into which model sort of solves all of the pain points that, yeah.
Yeah. And on those open models, I mean, we see a lot of different startups fine-tuning existing models, like Llama 2, for example. We see a number of startups doing their own fine-tuning, and they're hosting that back on Hugging Face. I mean, are you seeing an expansion of those communities sort of taking those models, reiterating on them, putting them back, somebody else reiterating on that again? It seems to be something that's expanding a lot in the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, I would say 3 years. That's what's happening on Hugging Face, right? That's why we have 1 million repositories hosted. Like, I look back at the last 5 years of progress in machine learning and AI, and to me, like, the most important thing is the advent of transfer learning, right? So it's the ability to leverage a model that's been pre-trained on vast amounts of data using huge amounts of compute for a long time, and then adapt that very efficiently through fine-tuning. That means that you can reuse the work of others in the community. That means that you can build upon each other's work. And that's why whenever there's a big base pre-trained model that lands on Hugging Face, like Falcon, like Llama 2, like Mistral, there's an explosion of like fine-tuned models that try to be better at certain things or more efficient.
Yeah. So we work mostly with startups, but of course there's many enterprises out there that are also exploring generative AI, starting to implement that in terms of their own workloads. What are some of the distinct challenges that larger enterprises or established companies might have integrating generative AI into their existing workloads? And I'm guessing we probably have some folks in the audience today who are have an existing product or service and are thinking about how they can adapt generative AI and generative AI features into that product. So what are some of the challenges and things that they might face, and how would they navigate that?
Yeah, I would say that enterprises have like their set of requirements, right? They may be legal requirements, they may be compliance requirements, they may be IT requirements. And that's why very early on we decided to partner in a strategic way with Amazon so that our users can benefit from all that has been built within the AWS and specifically Amazon SageMaker, so that all those legal, all those compliance, all those IT requirements are sort of checked. And within that environment, like, you can use our open source to do what you want to do. So I think that's one set of challenges that are pretty much solved by the solutions that we collaborate together building. And then, of course, again, there's like access to compute. But that's going to take a lot of effort by a lot of companies to solve.
Yeah, well, I mean, on that subject, this is an area that we certainly work with customers a lot in terms of securing access to compute, both for training and inference. Brennan up front mentioned we recently launched Amazon Bedrock, which is one way that we're working to improve customer experience on that access to compute. We talk a lot at AWS about undifferentiated heavy lifting. So the reality of a lot of generative AI up until now has been having to build these clusters of compute and GPUs and manage that. We're continually working to innovate on how we abstract that away from customers. Customers don't want to be managing, fleets of servers, et cetera. And so services like Bedrock would allow customers to access that through an API so that then they can burst up and down those inference workloads without, say, having to maintain their own fleet. I think you'll see us do a lot more in that space in the coming months ahead in terms of thinking about how we improve that experience around burstable workloads. Because as you say, it is in many ways the biggest challenge a lot of companies have in terms of thinking about how they build and deploy that. And so it's certainly an area we're working very hard on. So you mentioned earlier about the large models versus the small models and fine-tuning of models. And when these papers come out on a new model, in some cases they're very focused on solving a specific use case, and then in other cases it's how many AP exams can it pass, what SAT score does it get, can it write a PhD dissertation, and can it replace a radiologist all in one model, right? And so what is the balance between building these mega models that 70, 100 plus parameter models and the smaller models in terms of compute capacity, in terms of should folks be thinking more about smaller models focused on their use cases? What are the trade-offs that somebody would be considering as they're thinking about one of these very large, very impressive models, but requires a lot of compute versus smaller models that we see a lot of being developed now as well?
Yeah. No, the gigantic models are really great to explore the possibilities. It's a great scientific endeavor. If the scientific results are openly shared. But what we've seen over the past 6 months is that since Meta released the original Llama and then Llama 2, and TII released Falcon, we've seen an explosion of open models, large and small, of all sizes, that can replicate and surpass in specific use cases the biggest closed models. And like for somebody who's not living and breathing in this space, it's quite hard to sort of orient yourself through all these releases. So we created a very useful tool that's called the Open LLM Leaderboard. You can very easily find that on Hugging Face, and it continuously evaluates over 2,000 open large language models. And what's interesting is that you can very easily filter all those models for its size. That gives you an idea of like what kind of cost you need to put behind it in order to run that. What type of model? Is that a pre-trained model, fine-tuned model? What kind of architecture, what kind of license is that model? So it allows you to sort of sift through models that might be applicable to your use case. And then you can look at the evaluation metrics, which are typically done by running commonly accepted benchmarks. These benchmarks tend to ask very academic questions to models. So you were talking about, okay, companies, use cases, et cetera. It's a great way to get started. Look at the evaluation metrics. But what you really need to do is to focus on the specific problem that you're trying to solve, the very feature you're trying to solve. And that will tell you, like, do I need a 7 billion fine-tuned model, or do I need Claude 2? All those questions are going to be answered when you start really looking at the use case that you are targeting.
Excellent. And you mentioned Claude. Claude is available on Amazon Bedrock that we mentioned, and you also mentioned Llama 2, which we recently announced with Meta will also be available soon. So just to wrap up, I think we have about a minute or two left here. What is your kind of personal best use case for GenAI? And then I think all of us have we're working to implement that in business use cases. We've had a bit of fun with it, but what do you personally find as the most useful use case for GenAI that you either use or aspire to use in your life?
Yeah, I guess I've been using GenAI for a long time, and actually so have you. Maybe you hadn't noticed, but whenever you're typing an email and you see like the rest of the sentence come out, like that's GenAI. Like that's been around a while. Whenever if you're driving or getting driven by a Tesla, that happens to also be GenAI, or at least this transformer, right? But what I'm excited about is like all those tools that we use every day to get better and better, so I can get more time back in my day. And that applies to all the services that we use every day, right? We see that. Like we see that with Spotify, like all the cool new features that they shipped. We see that, I don't know, I use Notion. Like I see all these features that come out. And all that amounts to just being more productive. And that's what I'm excited seeing more of.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, thank you very much for being with us today. You'll be here during the happy hour at the end, so if you have any questions, I'm sure Jeff will be happy to talk to you then. But thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your partnership with AWS. All right, we're going to turn it back over to Jason. Yeah.
Okay, folks. Thank you, Nick and Jeff, for that very insightful discussion. Wrapping up our content today, we have Grace Isvard joining us from Lux, who will be leading a panel with some of the most talented AI builders in the field. And the topic of this is going to be building great AI products. And so I'm going to turn it over to Grace to introduce our panelists. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And so nice to meet all of you. Thank you for being here. A big thank you to AWS for hosting us in this gorgeous space. They've been awesome partners to us at Lux Capital. Again, I'm at Lux. We're lucky to partner with many AI companies right here in New York, like Hugging Face, like Runway ML, like Mosaic ML, like Together, several others. I'm going to turn it over to our panelists and have them introduce themselves. Again, these are amazing AI builders speaking to an awesome audience of AI builders, so hope we'll have a really great discussion. Elan, why don't you start?
Hello, does it work? Hello? Yes, okay, great. Hi, my name is Elan Borough. I just founded a company named ThrivePal where we build AI coaches to help people achieve their personal development goals. Before that, for 8 years, I was doing AI research at Facebook in the FAIR labs and leading the East Coast region for exploratory research. And I'm very happy to be here today.
Thank you. Hey there, I'm Eugene. I'm the co-founder and chief product officer at Maven AGI. We are reimagining the customer experience for enterprise, starting with customer support. I have a couple of co-founders here with me in the audience as well. And before that, I led product for applied machine learning at Stripe and personalization for Google News.
Testing. 1, 2. Hello, hello. Hello, hello. There we go. Hey, everyone. My name's Brandon. I'm the founder and CEO of Nomic. At Nomic, we make really big maps of data in really small language models. Our goal is to improve the explainability and accessibility of AI. Before my work at Nomic, I worked at a startup called Rat AI, which was applying generative models in the radiology domain back in 2018. And I saw a need to improve the explainability and the accessibility of the models. So here I am.
Hello. Okay. Hello, I'm Arvin. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Perplexity. At Perplexity, we are making an audacious bet on reimagining the most important software category known to all of us, which is search, consumer search. And then we are trying to take away from all of us from consuming links to directly getting answers to any question we can ask.
Awesome. So our first question is about product experience, because all of you guys are product builders of fast-growing companies in a very fast-moving space. We've seen tons of new research papers coming out, the tech's moving quickly. At the same time, we're also seeing these products lose their novelty quickly, where retention rates are kind of going off a cliff. So how do all of you build differentiated and high retention products in the midst of this landscape? Why don't you start?
It's still on, great. So as I mentioned before that, I was at Meta. I really love this company. I really enjoyed being there. But you can really see the contrast there is between an incumbent and a small company, which is that whenever you want to do something, so for example, I wanted to build a chatbot to do personal development, and I was in approvals for 5 years for something that had no AI. And it was reviewed 40 times, like so many, because it makes sense because they have to move very carefully. They actually have a huge thing that you don't want to mess up. And so it means that they can't adapt as quickly as small structures can. It also means that they're a more attractive litigation target than a small startup can be. And that's always going to be true, that when you're a startup, you can be a lot more focused, a lot more opinionated, and take a lot more risks than a huge company. So for me, that's going to be what allows us to keep growing, pick smaller fights that are more focused, that we can entirely do all we can on that one thing rather than try to do everything and maintain the castle at the same time.
Yeah, and I think the point you just made about focus is really important. I think generative AI is a really exciting technology, but we need to step back and actually focus on the user problem. And I imagine that a lot of the folks that are having challenges with retention are because they're maybe over-indexing on a technology, not on the problem itself. For what Maven is doing, I think we've all experienced terrible customer service and customer support. And for companies, it's also a really painful, really expensive problem. We're hearing, $40, $45 a ticket, and you're not getting, rich quality customer service experiences like you would expect. And so our focus is on solving that pain point, both for users and for companies. Maybe we can bring that down to $20 or $10 to actually have a substantial impact on day-to-day usage.
Yeah, I think that's all broadly correct. There's this emerging discourse about how AI is not a product in and of itself. It is a component of, a next generation of products. And so I think Nomic's in a really interesting place because we have this visualization system that is fundamentally new, and we can power it with the models that we build. And there's this harmonious feedback loop that starts to run there where as we improve the visualization and explainability system, the models get better, which unlock new capabilities for the visualization system. And I think towards defensibility, the quicker you run that cycle, the more defensible your entire stack becomes.
Yeah, so very few products get really good retention. And you can kind of break it down into a Venn diagram and minimize the frequency of companies that get into the intersection of all these circles. That's speed, any product with good retention is usually really fast. Accuracy, like especially for generative AI products, it just has to work. Reliability, it has to work pretty much anytime you try it, which is actually pretty hard as you get a lot more users. And then it has to get more and more personalized to the user. So this is obviously much more easy to do with GenAI than before GenAI. And finally, like the UX and the UI has to be delightful. There should be some joy for the user. So if you look at all these 5 circles, and it's already pretty hard to even have a positive in one of these circles, but you want to have a positive in all 5, that narrows down like the total number of startups that can even attempt to do this, right? But if you can somehow get there, then you're among the best products in the market.
All good insights. Arvind, I'm going to go back to you because my next question is on model efficiency and infrastructure. I know we've had some fun conversations around this. It was recently reported that GitHub Copilot is losing an average of $20 per user per month, which is a big theme we've discussed with a lot of our own companies, is how do you build efficient AI infrastructure stacks? So Arvind, I'd love to start with you on what you've done specifically at Perplexity to kind of improve that model efficiency, whether it's running your own infrastructure or working with specific optimizations to make that efficient in the long run.
Yeah, but by the way, the GitHub Copilot claim is false. It was denied by the CEO, Nat Friedman, former CEO. They actually have been profitable ever since they launched and started monetizing. So that, I don't know why, there was an article on that. So given that Nat's denied it, I'll answer specific to Perplexity. What we do is, there's just so many ways in which you can optimize. You can cache a lot of things. You can, first of all, like the ultimate way to actually be profitable is you have your own infrastructure, right? The less you rely on other people. There's a reason GitHub Copilot is profitable because Microsoft has the checkpoints from OpenAI and they can serve it themselves, right? So if you really want to save costs at the ultimate level, you got to go as close as possible to the hardware. But even a layer above that, you can do a lot of clever things like how you route traffic, how you cache the requests, and which models you use for what kind of queries. And in a product like ours, Search, there's just not just one LLM that does the retrieval augmented part. There's just a lot of LLMs that understand the query, come back and ask you clarifying questions, come back and suggest new questions to ask. So all of these are just a family of LLMs that's working together. So it's like playing the orchestra. There's a term in large language models research called orchestration. And in that, you can save a lot of costs if you're hyper-focused on every individual component.
Brandon, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as an aside here, it's curious that Wall Street Journal says one thing and Nat says another, and this is going to become an increasing challenge as more voices, human and autonomous, weigh in with their opinion on the internet. But in terms of model efficiency, I think, what we see right now are a lot of different organizations are playing with GPT-4, trying to figure out where exactly it fits in the flowchart of information through their organization. But what we found at RadAI, which was the radiology startup that I previously worked at, is that over time you will focus in on what particular boxes in that flowchart of information are really important to get right and to automate. And then you build a model that is more focused on those particular tasks. And so suddenly you don't have to run this generalist model where you've got thousands of GPUs at inference time or something like this. You can compress it down to nowadays we're running GPT for all on MacBooks and get equivalent performance within the task. And so I think as that unit economic pressure mounts and organizations get a better idea of what role these models play, we're going to start to see this shift towards smaller, more domain-specific models.
Very helpful. We're going to move on to evaluation now, because it's also one thing if you've managed to figure out the product, if you've managed to figure out the efficient infrastructure stack, whatever the cost may be for GitHub Copilot, but it's another thing to have really understanding how accurately is that product answering the question, right? So I'd love to have you guys chat a little bit about how you're evaluating products today. A lot of folks are using human loops. That could also lead to self-referential loops. So how do you perform evaluation, and how do you expect that evaluation to evolve in the future?
So I think, especially for enterprise use cases where quality is so important, getting really strong understanding of evaluation frameworks is critical and incredibly hard to do with large language model because they write answers that at first blush look incredibly accurate. At Stripe, I was looking at spreadsheets until I was blue in the face of various answers that it would generate. And like, I think this is right, but I'm not sure, to the point where you had to get the CTO to be like, is this actually accurate? It writes very plausible answers. And so one of the techniques that actually ended up working really well was using the large language model to evaluate itself and to score itself. And for example, back testing for what we're doing with customer support tickets, where we can take the last month of support, that what the human asked the support agent, what the agent actually wrote back, and what the AI model wrote back, and then ask the LLM to evaluate itself. And that makes it tremendously easier to get scoring, in addition to offline kind of and online feedback.
Yeah, I want to actually mention this, that the fact that more and more the language models are powerful enough to be able to evaluate themselves is both a blessing and a curse. So it's a blessing because now, we used, I mean, I've been doing machine learning since 2005. And like, at the time I didn't even know there was such a thing. Somebody talked about this, I'm like, it looks cool. Like for the longest time, we had to evaluate with like, for example, typically MTurk or something like this, where you get humans to rate something, and they're not super invested in the task, they want to make some money. So the evaluation is like, okay, that gives you a sense of like, the ratings of median uninterested humans casually glancing at something, which is a good signal. But the models are actually more invested. Like the models, they're better than they're usually less good than your best humans, and they're better than your average human that you can get on a crowdsourcing platform. So that's pretty good. There's a big danger though, which is that if you think about the moment where we're in right now, we're at the moment where we've trained, let's take ChatGPT as example. We've taken all the data that got generated by all humans until September 2021, and we trained the models on this. And now all the evaluations are like using that knowledge to decide what's good, what's not good. And people are using that model to generate new things. So there's a danger. There was a paper written by, I don't remember who, but someone famous, an NLP person. Perhaps, no, I'm going to say something wrong, so I'm just going to abstain, because I'm not a language model, so when I don't know, I don't say things. But there was this thing where basically they were saying that now that humans were all using those models to create content, write blog posts, is just going to get like like progressive impoverishment on what's on the internet. And when we try the next generation of model, it's just going to be ChatGPT learning ChatGPT has produced, and then you do more of that, and then it evaluates its work. It's like, that's great, that's exactly what we have said, perfect. And then you have this thing where it gets more and more like higher in the scores, but it's just because, you know, it's just scoring itself. And so when I started machine learning, there was this guy, Sam Roweiss, fantastic researcher who unfortunately is not with us anymore, very beloved in the NeurIPS community at the time, like back when we were a tiny, small community. And he was saying, the first thing you have to think about when you do a model is how it's going to cheat, because it's always going to cheat. So you give it a loss function that looks like a good proxy for what you want to do. And no matter how carefully you design it, as soon as you give it to the model, it's going to try to cheat to give you something that looks like it's doing what you want, but it's actually not exactly doing what you want. And so little by little, it's going to go further away from that moment when you decided it was a good proxy, and it's going to find a way that looks like it's what you're doing, but you have to reevaluate, say, oh no, now it's doing this, but it's actually not like doing my task. For example, you want to recognize a cow, and it says that's a cow, and it's correct, but it's actually recognizing the grass around the cow, or something like this. So what we do need is something like constantly get humans back in the loop and think, okay, is this really what you want? Can we do better? What should we tell the model? How should we reevaluate our loss function? And be like very careful in evaluation to not be too complacent that the scores are good, so I'm just going to look at my panels, everything looks great, I can go home. It's like, no, sometimes you have to look at your data. Look, is like, oh, actually this score's great, but I don't like it, or this is not diverse enough, I don't like it. So like constantly stay skeptical and present with the evaluation. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
Very comprehensive. You want to jump in?
That thing of picking a metric and optimizing for it, it's not just artificial neural nets that struggle against that. Even humans struggle at it. It's called Goodhart's law. Like, once you pick a metric, it's easy to be a good metric.
Awesome. Going to transition now into the fact of actually deploying enterprise AI in production. So we talk to a lot of enterprises, and I think all of you guys probably talk a lot to enterprises who want to deploy AI in production, but haven't really been able to do so yet. So I'd love to hear from your firsthand experience, and maybe Eugene, you can take this one to start. What are you hearing from users deploying AI enterprise-grade scale, and what are their biggest challenges?
Yeah, I think the excitement and enthusiasm is absolutely there, and really coming from the board level or the CEO as a mandate saying, how will you use generative AI, support leader, sales leader across the various functions. And so we've all used ChatGPT, and I think folks in the enterprise as well. Like, the opportunity is almost self-evident, but the problems are pretty major to overcome. Hallucination, security, what you've mentioned kind of before, privacy, as well as just having very limited AI resources within most organizations. And really the question comes down to build or buy. Some folks, data science orgs, for example, really want to build using this technology, but should they be building all things? Should they be building something that is very additive to their core business, but maybe some support functions are something that's more of a buy. And so that's where we're seeing the most of this is very high enthusiasm, quite slow, I would say, adoption from the security privacy folks who don't quite get it and have, will my data be used to train GPT-5? It's like, no, it's fine. And so that's just like this enthusiasm, but kind of lost in the wilderness. And I think our hope is that this will quickly now accelerate.
Keep going. Cool. I'm going to move on to the next question if no one else has anything to add. Perfect. Love to turn it over to Brandon now, because I'd love to talk about explainability and accessibility. Lux has partnered with lots of companies in the open source ecosystem, including Hugging Face that we just heard from earlier. And obviously, they're huge proponents of championing the open source ecosystem and greater accessibility and transparency and model training and performance. How do you approach AI explainability? And is there such a thing as explainable AI models to end users?
I think there is. And I want to go back to something that Elon said earlier, which was really bringing humans back into the loop, evaluating these systems. One of the reasons that I started Nomic was when I was working at this generative medical company, there was this massive disconnect between me as the engineer actually building the model and the doctors that we were using to evaluate them. And I was constantly looking for ways to kind of bridge that understanding gap and bring the subject matter experts into the process of data curation. And visualization is really what we found to be the key to bringing those two stakeholders together. And so I think that one of the largest opportunities for explaining these models is building tooling that allows the subject matter experts to sort of come to the table with the engineers, and it creates this collaborative process where everyone can look at the data and weigh in based on their experiences. And so I want to shout out some recent work we actually did with Hugging Face on their Obelix model. This is an open source GPT-4 vision, effectively. And through the work that they have done opening that data, and we've now mapped that data with our interface, anyone in the world can go and look at the data used to train this model and weigh in on, I believe that this concept is correctly represented or incorrectly represented, or, I am uncomfortable with this data, being in this model, or even in some cases, this is clearly like data that should not be in this model. And then even on the performance front, one of the things that we've done with the interface is making it so that you can color it by all this different metadata and sort of slice and dice it. And you start to get these very well-defined regions of where the model begins to fail. They almost appear as sort of hot spots in the territory of information. And so suddenly you can get these very, very sharp boundaries where an operator can say, oh, that's pretty close to one of these sort of red hot do not go areas. Perhaps we should back off to a human expert.
I have something to say on
Go
this.
ahead.
But it's kind of more, so part of my career I also did some experimental psychology, studying human biases and how we make decisions and how we lie to ourselves and to other people without knowing. And so in particular, I think, so I love all explainability, that's like Brandon says, like visualization, understanding what's going on, being able to look at what you're doing. The part that's often discussed that I feel like a lot more dicey is trying to make the decision of the model interpretable. So the reason why is we actually have this kind of black box like humans. They're extremely good at making up narratives. And when you measure what's happening in the brain, it's like the narrative or the explanation of why they did something is usually made up after the decision has been made, and it often doesn't correspond to the neural correlates of how they made the decision. So humans, sometimes they're going to respond to a narrative that sounds good and that looks convincing, and there's often a disconnect between that and the reality of what led to a decision. And if we're going to train models to give explanations that people validate. We might just train models to give good sounding explanations that are actually wrong. So I think there's a bit like, we can't ask too much. Sometimes some things are going to give stuff and give decisions that are correct, and all we can say is they're correct, and we cannot understand why in those billions of parameters that decision was made in a way that's like, explain it to me like I'm 5 in 7 bullet points. Sometimes it won't work. And so I think it's important for users of this model to like understand the limitation of like what we can ask for and make that choice that perhaps it's okay. I mean, I personally think it's okay to have some models that are more powerful where not everything is explainable. Otherwise, we're really limiting the space of what we can do. And in a way, perhaps catering to our human biases. Like there's an example from gaming that I like, that they say humans have intuitions about probabilities. That, you know, if I've missed 4 of my shots on a basketball thing, then I'm due for a win. And probabilities actually don't work like this. It's like I can flip a coin 5 times, and the next time it's just even if I got 5 tails, I'm just as likely to get 1 tail more. People expect that if I've gotten 5 tails, the next one it's going to come up heads. And so for game designers, when they make the probabilities work more like what we expect, so be inaccurate, people find it more satisfying. They think it makes more sense, more realistic. So if we want to make it more explainable, but I think first we have to really always put front and center the human biases that we know about, because otherwise we can perhaps distort the models to reflect our biases rather than reality. So that's all. I'm a big fan of reality.
And on the point you're just making now, I do wonder, as models get better and better and better and start surpassing human performance, does it matter anymore? Should we all just trust the black box? We're seeing in our experiments, our AI support agent is clearly a better support person than any human we've seen. It's to this point where I kind of trust it now more than I would trust the human, to the point you're making earlier about kind of like your average human performance now being exceeded by many models. A year or 2 out, maybe the best of us will still not be able to perform as well a model, and then maybe who are we to judge it? Maybe we should just trust the box.
But I think that's where it comes back to evaluation, where really you always should wonder, what are you trying to achieve? What's your objective, and is it meeting it? And like always ask yourself that question, because if it's meeting it, is it important for you that it's explainable to a 5-year-old? If it is, then by all means, limit your model and do this. If it's not, and you want the accuracy, make sure that you're measuring the right accuracy and not something that's a proxy that's not valid anymore. So like always revisiting this question of evaluation, and is your model doing what you wanted it to do?
I wanted to pipe in one more question on differentiation. We talked a bit at the beginning of how you differentiate your product, but more specifically, how do you differentiate your product versus big AI incumbents such as OpenAI or Anthropic, and or versus big incumbents who may be eager to deploy an AI version of your product? And anyone's open to take this question.
We move faster. It's really that simple. Like Elon hit the nail on the head, you know. There are conversations that we've had with enterprises where it's clear that every stakeholder is involved, is like so gung-ho on doing this particular thing, and yet somehow it drags on for months and months and months and months. And so, you know, the fundamental sort of advantage that startups have always had and will continue to have is their agility. And just stay agile, you know, move fast. Yeah.
You think that's the same for OpenAI and Anthropic as well, when they're shipping super quickly?
Yeah, it's interesting. I also think in AI specifically, you know, there's this narrative that, oh, you know, the GPU rich and the GPU poor, you know, the incumbents have this massive advantage. But what we found at Nomic is, you know, if you can be a little bit more intelligent about some of the efficiency choices you make, you can get 95% of the performance, you know, for a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the effort. And so suddenly it's not about having access to all this talent and all this compute. It's really more about, you know, we can build something that is pretty competitive, and now how do you package that, right? And so suddenly the playing field has become a lot more leveled.
But for me, I would say for OpenAI and Anthropic, actually one of their strengths also is they're very focused. Like they do one thing, they're trying to build those models, or for OpenAI, get to AGI. So I don't think they're going to have on their roadmap to like build cool visualizations like Nomic is doing. So in a way, the fact that they move fast is because they stayed focused, but it also means that they're not trying to do everything like Google or Meta are doing. So in a way, either they do everything, then they might want to go on your turf, but they move slow, or they stay very focused, then you know what their turf is, and you know, in a way, I think that's easier.
Awesome. Gonna wrap up, one more point on that? Or?
Yeah, on the point about incumbents, where the business models of existing companies are have a certain inertia. If you're selling some software per seat, and then your AI startup is eliminating software and people involved, and it's very challenging for large incumbents to change everything about both their business model and their roadmaps, all the way up to the performance of the engineers and how you're being judged. And so, coming from a quite large but still startup, you could see the inertia is making it really hard to adopt new technology, where folks who are building something new can reimagine something completely from scratch and kind of do something that is now possible that wasn't when incumbents were first formed.
So I think we're going to do our last question. I'd love each of you to answer this as we launch an amazing cocktail hour here. So thank you again, AWS, for sponsoring. Lux has always been excited about eye to the future. What's coming next from a tech perspective? What's a new research technology? What's a new product that's coming? Would love each of you to talk a little bit about what you're most excited about and what's coming next that maybe you haven't quite seen in a product to date, or a research advancement you're particularly reading a lot about. How about you start?
So for me, there's two things. One of them is models getting small, really small enough, like the small models getting even better, so that everyone can tinker on their laptop, and like we can see this whole creativity of everyone building new stuff and doing stuff with it. And the second is some methods that would allow to like update the models without having to retrain from scratch all the time, and like more, but still be good at the first thing, which is still we have this like chasing problem where the models, they move towards the new data, but they forget the first data. So like having things that would allow to not have to restart a launch from the beginning, which I'm sure the most big companies don't do this anymore, but it's like have like widespread methods, like I take this thing, it's not fine tuning, but how do I have this continuous improvement on whatever is being produced on the internet right now or the new data, so that we can have like not like model at this time, but it's a constantly evolving model that moves with you, something like that.
I think for what I'm most excited about is seeing a lot of the things that were being built 3 months ago, 6 months ago, now in production. I think ChatGPT is clearly very widely used, but there's not a lot of large-scale generative AI products that we're all using every day. There's probably a few now. But imagine 6 months or 12 months from now, where so many of our experiences can be now kind of made so much more special.
Yeah, I think if I was not building Nomic right now, and Nomic didn't already have 2 products, I think there's a massive opportunity in robotics and AI at the current moment. Because I think we see 2 trends. One is language models getting smaller, and so suddenly these things can be put onto embodied devices. And simultaneously, you see this move to multimodal AI, and sort of these multimodal data sets that not are only maybe language and video, but it's language, video, depth map, IMU data. And I think the intersection of those 2 things, like when those multimodal sort of bound models get small enough that they can start running consistently on these field robots that oftentimes don't have an internet connection, there's going to be something really, really fascinating happening there. So someone in this room, please go build that.
So I think like right now we already have 80% of the population's 80% skill level captured. So roughly approximately 64% of total human digital skill level. What's going to happen is that 64% is just going to keep going up. And so that what that'll create in turn is every product that exists today will just become a lot more reliable. The long tail of like, basically right now it's so easy to find hallucinations or mistakes. 2 years later it's going to be the opposite. You would struggle to, just like how the models struggle at being right now, you would struggle to like find the mistakes of the models. And that's going to make every single product experience we have today like exponentially better. And so we're just getting started even what exists today. We don't even need to get excited about like what's not possible today, because even just taking what exists today to the finish line is just going to be so much more valuable.
Awesome. Let's give a big round of applause for our panelists.
Hello. Thank you, Grace. That was amazing. Thank you all of our panelists for joining us. What a great way to wrap up our content today. And thank you for all of you for joining us. Please do stick around and join us for the cocktail reception, which is going to be downstairs. So you can just go straight to the back there, and there's a staircase that'll take you right to the reception. And I really hope all of you enjoy the rest of your Tech Week. Thank you.